Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining. This is the first presentation from the Black Country Chamber of Technology Special Interest Group. Quite a long title, but we shorten it to the Tech SIG or Technology SIG. And over the next 8 weeks, we're going to be running 4 webinars covering cybersecurity, and this is the first in the in that series. I'm just going to admit people as they come in. So the timings for this, it's 10 to 11. We aim to sort of be wrapped up with the presentation within 30 to 40 minutes, and then the rest of the time can be used for any questions that you've got. There is a Q&A section within Teams, so if you have any questions, if you could ask them within that Q&A section, and then we'll deal with them live if we can, and if we don't deal with, we'll pick up at the end. Okay, I think we can get going. Yeah. Right, so the first in the series is Defense in Depth. Now, a lot of the whole series is kind of tailored towards the requirements of Cyber Essentials. However, Defense in Depth goes above and beyond that. Here we're going to be giving you a 30,000-foot view of cybersecurity and all the areas that you should address. So we'll start off by introducing ourselves. So I'm Matt Yarrington from BlissTech Solutions, and I've worked in IT for over 30 years, and 15 years of those were spent in cybersecurity, working with some of the world's largest companies around the world. And then I decided to sort of switch it back into regular IT and set up BlissTech Solutions. Zishan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi there. I'm Zishan Parvez. I'm Professor of Cybersecurity at University of Wolverhampton, and I'm also the Director of Cyber Resilience and Artificial Intelligence Research Center. And I have over 10 years of experience in working with security, starting from cloud security, developing algorithms for encrypted data search, and then moving on to applied machine learning and AI for combating cybersecurity issues. And for the last 2 years, I've been with University of Wolverhampton as a Professor of Cybersecurity. Before that one, I was in Scotland with University West of Scotland. So here we are, and I've been actively involved with Black Country Chamber of Commerce, and this is the initiative that Chris and Matt has set up for a special interest group on technology with Black Country Chamber of Commerce. Yeah, Matt.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so moving on, it's quite a lot to cover. So it's not going to be a deep dive. It's a very high level view of all the elements that you should be considering when it comes to cybersecurity, and it's what's known as Defense in Depth. So we'll start off with just an explanation of what that actually means. So essentially, Defense in Depth is a layered approach. Think of it like the skins of an onion. So you've kind of got layer upon layer upon layer, and essentially what this does is it provides additional protection for mitigation of threats. So if one layer fails, then the other layers can act as a backup, and it gives you a comprehensive defense across all of your both physical technology, logical technology, and administrative and human risk to help you protect your business. It's not within cybersecurity. We don't say if something happens. It's a case of when. And the more layers of defense that you have in place will help you to protect yourself more fully, but also will help you to recover as well when it does happen. So the different areas that we're going to be covering today, so the physical security controls, the technical security controls, and then also admin and human security controls. And the benefits of having multiple layers, as I've already mentioned, is it reduces your risk. It gives you a more effective detection and response to threats as and when they happen, and it enhances the resilience of your business overall. So the first element of Defense in Depth we're going to discuss is network security. So what I've done actually in the slides is where these particular elements are relevant for Cyber Essentials, I've put a little CE next to it so you can see. And in some cases, it's where Cyber Essentials Plus is relevant, so you'll see a CE Plus next to that. So that's what those mean. So protecting the network infrastructure, you've got your perimeter preventions. So you've probably all heard of firewalls, and pretty much, well, nobody these days connects to the internet without a firewall. I remember 25 years ago working for a pretty large organization, and then they had their first firewall installed. And it was a kind of, it was quite a thing then, but now, even home broadband, your router that gets provided with you is essentially a firewall. And the basic firewalls just prevent against incoming threats, whereas more advanced firewalls can do a lot of additional things. So if you are a bit of a larger organization, you can have malware scanning, content filtering, and all intrusion prevention all built into what we call a next generation firewall. Another part of protecting your network infrastructure is segmentation. So this is something that's done at the switch level, the network appliance level, and it's essentially breaking that network up into domains using something called virtual LANs, and that prevents what's known as lateral movement. So when an attacker gets into your organization, let's say they manage to compromise a computer or get through your firewall, segmenting your network limits what they can do. So they could just be locked into a particular area of the network and can't move laterally. Because as soon as an attacker gains a foothold in a network, the first thing they will try and do is discover as much as they possibly can within that network. And segmenting the network helps to protect against that. Again, smaller businesses, not so relevant, but sort of larger businesses certainly is relevant. And then the secure configuration. So a big thing within Cyber Essentials is ensuring that the systems you have in place are securely configured. It's not good enough just to have a firewall. You have to make sure that it's configured correctly, securely, and the administrative controls to that are also locked down. Okay, so the tools that you would use for network security. So the essential ones is going to be a firewall. That's an absolute minimum requirement within Cyber Essentials. But then also virtual private networks to securely connect various parts of the network, and also monitoring software to ensure pick up on any malicious activity. Security audits and penetration tests. So penetration test is something that is required as part of Cyber Essentials Plus, and that having regular penetration tests and security audits just means you got a third party who's having a look and making sure you haven't got any gaps that you weren't aware of. And also policy updates, making sure you regularly review your network security policies to make sure they're still relevant. You haven't got any holes left open for things that you no longer need. So the next pillar of defense in depth we're going to talk about is endpoint security. So the strategies around endpoint security. So an endpoint is any computer device essentially that connects to your network and accesses your data. So we want to make sure that all of our endpoints, so that's Windows devices, Apple Macs, Linux, if you're into that kind of thing, and also servers are securely configured, and that their software is regularly kept up to date. Now, one of the sort of ways that attackers get into environments is through exploiting vulnerabilities. And these new vulnerabilities are discovered all of the time. So making sure that your software is kept up to date is very important. And then also having some form of threat detection on there. So traditionally known as antivirus, but these days it's a lot more than that. I think we cover that a bit more on the next slide. And then also data encryption, ensuring that the data on those devices is encrypted. So if it does fall into the wrong hands, it's essentially useless. So all endpoints matter. This is specific around Cyber Essentials. So what Cyber Essentials says is any device that has access to your company's data has to be included within the scope and treated the same as every other device. So this includes your devices that you issue to your employees, but also what's known as BYOD. bring your own devices. So this any personal device that an employee has that can access the data. So that could even be occasionally checking email. So this covers all company issued computers, mobiles and tablets, as you would expect, but also any personal computers, mobiles and tablets that your employees might use to connect and access your data. It also includes contractors. So if you have external people who are doing things on your behalf, like virtual assistants or bookkeepers, if they have access to your data from a cyber essentials point of view, they have to be treated in the same way. And then also any cloud PCs and servers and on-premise servers. So essentially anything that accesses your company data, whether you own it or not, is included within the scope for cyber essentials. Okay, the next pillar that we're going to talk about is cloud security. So cloud, pretty much everybody uses cloud in one form or another. Say everyone, there might be some very niche cases, but the majority of people who don't work in sort of highly secure environments will use the cloud. And the problem with cloud computing is it's accessible from anywhere. So it's the biggest benefit because it means you can get access to your systems and data from anywhere, but it also means anyone can hack you from anywhere they are within the world. So preventing data breaches by securing your cloud environment is very important. And also, from a GDPR point of view, or if you have to comply to any other regulations such as PCI DSS and others, then you need to make sure that your cloud environment is secured. Now, there tends to be a lot of confusion around cloud computing. And a lot of people think, well, it's in the cloud, it's not my responsibility. It's Microsoft, it's Google, it's Amazon's responsibility to look after my data. But within cloud security, there's something known as the shared responsibility model. And depending on the type of service that you use, determines up to what level you or the vendor is responsible for that. I'm not going to dive into this in too much detail because we will be running a webinar specifically around cloud security. But it's important to note that ultimately you are responsible for the data that's held within held with a cloud system, and you're responsible for securing that data as well. Yeah, I mean, Google it, look it up, the shared responsibility model. But we will be covering this a bit more in future presentations. So the best practices around cloud security. So the first of all is understand your responsibilities. Understand where the cloud vendor's responsibility ends and your responsibility starts, and you have to secure everything from that point on. Ensure that the access controls to the cloud services are secure. So always enable multi-factor authentication on all cloud services, and use role-based access controls where required to ensure that only the people who do need to have access actually have access. One of the common problems that you see within cloud systems is everybody has access to everything. And obviously that's not great if you've got some sensitive data on there that people shouldn't have access to. We'll cover human risk in a bit, but one of the largest sort of risks within an organization is insider risk. It's not people from the outside, it's people on the inside. So making sure you only give access to the people who do need access is important. And then also regular security reviews, the same as with your firewalls and everything else. Make sure that things are still relevant. And again, the access controls and the security reviews are something that is a requirement as part of Cyber Essentials. The next thing we're going to discuss is application security. So application security really only applies if you are writing your own software, either for your own internal use, or you've created a product that you are then selling on to other people. So securing software applications, you want to have regular security assessments to make sure that you've closed off vulnerabilities. Within a lot of software that people create, they use a lot of open source code, so they don't write all the code themselves. They're taking bits from that other people have written and including those. So you need to make sure that you have the latest sort of code for that to make sure it's secure. use secure coding practices, and also run code reviews as well. Get somebody else to check the code to make sure it's written in a secure way. And then also get your applications penetration tested, certainly if they are exposed to the cloud and they can be accessed from anywhere. And this will, make sure a third party can uncovers any vulnerabilities or any holes that you've got within your system. And this is again a requirement for Cyber Essentials Plus. Okay, we've already discussed endpoints, but I'm going to dive a bit deeper into mobile device security. Because more and more these days, people are using mobile devices to access company data. In fact, we've got one or two clients who don't even have computers; they only access stuff on tablets and mobile phones. So the problem with mobile device security, so it's the ubiquity of it. There's more mobile devices on Earth than there are people. And there's estimated to be, by the end of this year, 18 billion mobile devices. So that's a prediction from Statistica. And many staff, will use their own devices to access company data and do their work. So there's a risk of loss or theft if mobile devices are easily lost or stolen. And if those devices aren't, and the data within them isn't secured, then obviously, you've got a problem with data leakage. Also, when people leave organizations, if they have your company data on their personal device, when they leave the organization, you take that with them. So if you haven't got control of that, then you've lost control of your data and potentially fallen into traps around GDPR. And also user behavior. So users try and make it as easy as possible. It has got better with biometrics on mobile devices, but some people just don't set a PIN on the device, or they'll set just 1111. And of course, if your company data is on that device, if it gets into the wrong hands, then that's a problem. So protecting personal and mobile devices. So I'll touch on this concept on the next slide as well. But mobile device management and mobile application management are two techniques that you can use to protect your company data. So they can lock down devices, enforce security policies to keep that data secure, whether that's on a personal device or whether it's a company-owned device. It will enforce security policies to make sure that the devices have secure PIN codes and so on for accessing that data. That is a requirement of Cyber Essentials, whether that's a personal device or whether it's a work-issued device. And some solutions give you the ability to monitor devices as well to find out their last location in case they get lost, and report any security threats that are uncovered on them. So diving a little bit deeper into mobile device management and mobile application management. So some of the capabilities that these devices have, and I should point out that these aren't required for Cyber Essentials. However, it does make achieving Cyber Essentials a lot more straightforward. So the encryption on devices, it will ensure that devices are encrypted. If it's a personal device, for example, it will only encrypt the work area of the device. It doesn't, it doesn't take control of any personal data, and it also gives you remote wipe capabilities. So on a corporate-owned device, you can choose to wipe the device in its entirety. So if it's reported lost, you just send a remote wipe command. The next time it connects to the internet, it will be reset to factory defaults. For personally owned devices with business data, it will just wipe the business data from the device and not affect any other user's personal data. It ensures devices are securely configured, so you make sure that a PIN code has to be set before they access the device and company applications. And you can also push out malware protection to devices as well. Now, malware protection on mobile phones. It's not something people typically do, but Cyber Essentials do say you have to have some form of protection against malicious applications on mobile devices. That can be traditional antivirus, if you want to call it that, in inverted commas, but other methods of doing it are available. Okay. So the next section is around human security. Humans are probably the most critical risk factor within organizations they are the ones that click on the link that the hacker has sent to provide, access to your organization. So now it's essentially the last line of defense. So if all of the other security defenses fail and an email lands in a user's inbox that they shouldn't be opening, they are essentially the last line of defense, the person between keyboard and chair. So training users and identifying the users within your business who pose the greatest security risk is essential for proactive security measures. So, training those people who are ultimately that last line of defense can save you bacon. So one of the ways to do this is by running regular cybersecurity training courses. And this doesn't have to be an in-person thing. It can just be a 10-minute course that's sent to the user once a fortnight or once a month that they run through, and it will measure their feedback and how they respond to the questions that they get, just to ensure that, also you can identify who are the ones that aren't doing so well. Also sending out phishing simulations to essentially try and trick your employees to click it on links, and then putting them on more training should they click on the link that they shouldn't have done. I mean, fortunately, it's a safe environment, so if they do, it's not a big deal, but will help you to identify the people who are greater risk. And it also creates a security conscious culture. So if people know that that they are being measured with their cyber defense, and also the importance around that, then that will help to create a culture of cybersecurity within the organization. Okay, so that's my sections done. I'm going to hand over to Zishan now to carry on.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. So I'll pick it from now on. So now we are covering the another element or the pillar of cyber essential is physical security. So whenever we talk about cyber security, always technical things come to the mind other than human factor security. So physical security is another aspect that we need to focus on, is that check and verify all personnel entering the physical establishment. You need to make sure that they are authorized and identified before they enter into the space, which contains your digital infrastructure, or it contains anything else that is running the operations of the business. So it's important to make sure anyone who's entering into the development is authorized and they are also identified. So more important files should be locked up. So it's not only digital assets that we need to worry about. So they are physical assets that we need to consider providing appropriate security in place. So you need to make sure that all physical files, if you are printing anything, they are locked in, and obviously they are protected. Share all important papers before disposing them. So it's best practice to make sure that you're disposing all of your confidential information, anything that can potentially lead to leaking information about your organization. So it's important to shred all the information and the documents in a secure manner. And then also erase all storage media, including your hardware devices, disk, any USB devices, any portable media that is being used within the organization. If they are not used anymore, so there should be a proper policy to dispose them in a secure manner, because although you might have deleted the contents, it's just the binary information that remains on those storage devices that can be recycled and re-engineered. So it's important that whenever these external storage devices are being used, they are erased properly and they are destroyed whenever the appropriate times come in. And all machines on the network should be protected by the passwords. It must be best practice that anything that is connected on the internet or on a local area network should be password protected. There shouldn't be a guest account without any passwords, or there shouldn't be any accounts that the user doesn't need to enter the password. So there must be a first line of defense. Obviously, if someone is connected on the internet, and that comes through and password. And from the password, we talked about how to come up with a secure password, how to come up with a password that can be compromised or that cannot be compromised and can have an appropriate level of security in place. And then lock and store dumpster in a secure manner. Obviously, although you might have shared all the information in a secure manner, but it's also important to discard them in a proper and secure manner. So it's important to lock the dumpster. Anything that is being secured and shared must be locked in a secure manner. Then comes to the data security. That's another fundamental element of cyber essential about that how you protect the data that flows within a network or data that resides in the network. There are three forms of data that we consider: data in transit, that is moving over the network; data on rest, data that basically resides on your storage medium; and data in processing, and any data that being computationally processed within a network or on a compute devices. And whatever we are going to discuss, that applies to all of those one all in all three forms. The first one is the data security is the main underpinned by data encryption. So processing or converting information into a secret code to prevent any unauthorized access. So what encryption does is basically it scrambles the information within the data that can only be recovered if you have the required information that is required to recover them. So used to protect sensitive information such as passwords, personal information, or credit card information, or any information that is being stored, processed, and persisted within an organization can come under the category of data security, can be encrypted. And they are different forms of encryption that we can use depending on the usage of information and usage of the data that we have. So there are two main types of encryption, namely symmetric encryption and asymmetric encryption. So in a nutshell, symmetric encryption is the encryption that uses the same key to encrypt and decrypt. And there are different applications of symmetric encryption, and asymmetric encryption is a type of encryption that uses two different keys. So that magics come through mathematics, that you can derive two keys. One can be used to encrypt and the other key can be used to decrypt. An example that I can give you, that whenever you logged into a secure website, whenever you see a green lock over the URL, that's basically using the asymmetric encryption, that your browser uses your key to encrypt the content, and then on the other side they uses the public key to decrypt the content. And that basically builds the trust that whether you're connected to Amazon or you're connected to Google or you're connected to any cloud service provider, that trust basically comes through that asymmetric encryption. And in symmetric encryption, so you can see that we have a sender and that sends uses a plain text and they use a secret key. And on the receiving side, we have a receiver that receives the decryption algorithm. They receive the ciphertext and they use the same key to retrieve the plain text. So rely on a shared secret encryption between them, key distributed to all members who participate in the communication. So that brings another challenge, that if you want to establish, if you want to use the same key to encrypt and decrypt, before you start communicating any confidential information or anything that need to be communicated, that key need to be exchanged. And that solution is then addressed by on the next slide by using asymmetric encryption algorithm. But for generally, for symmetric encryption algorithm, although it's secure and it's fast as compared to any other type of encryption algorithm, the challenge is to establish the shared key or to exchange the key between sender and receiver without being compromised. So employ the same employed to perform bulk encryption. So that symmetric encryption is mainly used to encrypt in bulks or in huge quantity of information. If you only need to encrypt small information or small text or small data, symmetric encryption should not be a way forward. So symmetric key is fast. Symmetric encryption key is fast, naturally lend itself to hardware implementations. If you talk about corporate, if you talk about encryption at a speed and a bulk, so they are implemented into our firewalls, into any hardware devices that secure end-to-end communication. So they are also encrypted into VPNs, and they are also used in VPN applications. For data security from asymmetric encryption point of view, so we have, so each user has two keys. One is public key, the other key is the private key. So public key is, name suggests, is shared with all the participants. So if I need to send some information or send some secret information or any information that need to be authenticated, and I want to communicate with someone else, I can just post my public key that can be used by anyone else. And I can encrypt the data by using my public key, and someone who will receive the text, they will use my public key to decrypt. This gives them the assurance that I'm the one who's sending the text and someone is not impersonating me, or there is no man in the middle attack. and on the receiving side, they have the confidence that they have received the text from my side. So that basically, and that can only come through by using two different keys. And that's is another concept that we have is called non-repudiation. That if we were to in a dispute, and the other party need to establish that I'm the only one who's sending the text message or any other messages or any other information, they can use that thing because I have the private key and no one else has the private key other than me to encrypt that file or to send this file. So the basic concept relies on public key and private key. So public key can be used to encrypt and public key can also be used to decrypt depending on the circumstances. If you want to have integrity in place, if you want to establish, if you want to check the integrity, we can use private key to encrypt, and the other side, they can use public key to decrypt. And if you want to have confidentiality in place, we use public key to encrypt and the private key to decrypt. What does it mean? That if I want to have confidentiality in place, and if someone wants to send me a message or text data or any other information, they can use my public key, and I'm the only one who can decrypt by using my private key. So the basic concept relies on public key and private key that can be interchanged. The other pillar that we have in Cyber Essential is asset management. So modern digital infrastructure is hybrid. So it's not only one server that resides in one corner. It's all now cloud-based, and that cloud can be public, private, or a hybrid. Means that either you do not have anything, you're solely relying on cloud service provider, namely AWS, Google App Engine, or Microsoft Azure, and you are going all public, so you don't have any compute infrastructure in your physical infrastructure that can be regarded as a public cloud. And then we have private cloud, in which you also have the information over the service provider, but you have control over it and you're managing over it. And hybrid is the combination between public cloud and private cloud, depending on the application that you want to achieve out of it. And on premises, we have data centers, and we can have services, and we can have workstations. So you can all see that right now we are using a hybrid infrastructure in which we are using our own endpoint devices to connect to that webinar, and then all of these things is served by Microsoft through Teams. And then we have edge computing on premises and mobile and edge devices. Edge computing is the way forward, I must say, in which basically enables you to have the low power devices to connect to a cloud service provider and enjoy the benefit of having greater resources in compute power and in storage power. And then we have operational technology that enables you to connect to critical infrastructure or anything, and helps you to establish the control over the digital infrastructure or anything that resides in. And then we have IoT and industrial Internet of Things. So Internet of Things or industrial Internet of Things, a combination of smaller devices that is able to sense and actuate in an environment and transmit the data or receive instructions over the wire or over the medium. Asset management is basically starts with the visibility. It's important to have a visibility of what you have in terms of digital infrastructure and also the physical infrastructure. So security team must have a visibility in terms of threats and vulnerabilities information. So CVE or Common Vulnerability and Exploit Database is a source that can be used to have to identify any known vulnerabilities that's out there. If you're using any particular software, you can use CVE to identify that are there any known vulnerabilities for the version that you're using or for any previous version that you have used. It helps you to have a better oversight of what are the possibility of being compromised by using a particular software. And then we have cloud security, and then we have compliance. These are the two lines of defense that you can have. So if you have cloud security in place, it means that even if you're connected to a public or private cloud, you have appropriate security measures in place. And then we have compliance that basically gives the guidelines or the blueprints to establish the secure practices. Then we have IT team visibility. So know your digital infrastructure, and then what you are connected is a fundamental things. So you can have whitelisting and you can have blacklisting depending on the application. So whitelisting is basically you enable only those things that are authorized, and blacklisting means that you can identify that these are the devices that cannot be connected. Anyone else can be connected. So it's a way of approaching the security mechanism, whether you want to have all in or you want to have a restricted manner in place. And then we have procurement and planning in place, which comes with the hardware and software. Obviously, And as we go on, our digital infrastructure is getting complex and complex. Even if you start building an app, it's not a single app or it's not a single library that is used. So a library that is open source, developed by another developer, and based on something fundamental. So it's very important to have an oversight of what you are buying, from where you are buying, and what is happening with the hardware and software things. So it's all become you need to have an end-to-end and oversight of what is being brought in. Understanding the apps, it's important that you know your assets, your what are the hardware and software information, that what kind of an hardware you have, how obsolete it is, whether it's up to date or not. Software information, what kind of a software that you have installed within your digital infrastructure, and then whether they are obsolete or not. User information, let's briefly discuss on user training. So it's important that we have appropriate training in place, so users are aware of what they need to do, what are the best practices, and what they really should avoid, and the management of all those things that comes under the category of understanding the gaps, means that how these things are managed. And then we have vulnerabilities, relevant and critical vulnerabilities. So it's not all vulnerabilities are applicable to digital infrastructure that someone is managing. So it's important that we identify that what are the relevant vulnerabilities for an organization or for a digital infrastructure, by using common vulnerability exploit database or any open source information that's out there. Delta of installed and updated version. So it's important that we identify that what software's version that you have and what are the updated versions that are already out there. So a best practice is that all of your softwares should always be updated. Any patch from any OM, so any operating system or any apps should be applied to make sure that all vulnerabilities and securities are fixed in that manner. And then we have compliance. Any unapproved softwares obviously should be removed, and any processes and practices that are not being compliant with any regulations, that should be stopped and can have a greater oversight of it. Incident response is another pillar that comes under the category of cyber researchers. So a structured approach to detect, respond, and to recover from cybersecurity incidents. So it's a well-structured approach, a well-defined playbook that what you need to do or someone needs to do if there is in case of cyber attack. So it's not that firefighting situation. It must be well coherent and well orchestrated activities that need to be performed in a case of incident. Communication plays a huge role, and that's what we have seen recently in the cyber attacks that we have seen on retail providers, Co-op and Marks and Spencer and Harrods. That communication is significantly important. That what you are communicating out there, do not create panic within your customer base, and also do not let any other unnecessary information get away that can create a damage for your organization. Aims to minimize the damage, reduce recovery time, and limit cost. So the whole concepts of incident responses, that they need to minimize the damage that has been caused either by availability of the service or the reputation. Reduce the recovery time, that how quickly you can recover from an attack. And I think it's well understood that cyber attacks will happen. There is no way we can deter, or there is no way we can reduce those attacks. It's now the concept of cyber resilience, that how we can quickly recover from those cyber attacks, and then basically limits the cost. So again, it sets a well-structured approach that comes into the category of preparation, that you need to prepare. You need to have appropriate policies and procedures in place in case of a cyber incident. Then you need to the appropriate measures should be in place to identify any malicious activities that are happening in an organization. All complex attacks, the attacks that we have seen, they are not one-off an incident. They happen over the period of time. So a malicious entity will first gather an access or gain an access to the services or the infrastructure. Then they try to maintain the access, and then they apply the access escalation and things like that one to make sure that they can cause as much damage as possible. So it's important to identify any malicious activity that is happening within digital infrastructure. And containment. So once it is identified, it's important to contain and do not infiltrate within a network. So whether it's one service or one department is being compromised, it should not have a knock-on effect on the other services that are there in an organization. Eradication, that how quickly you can remove it. So if you need to have a subnet or anything that need to be removed from the network, or you have a kill switch of the infrastructure, so that need to be in place. And then we have recovery, that how quickly you can recover from those attacks. So again, this is come to the category restore any systems, backups and things like that one, so that you can recover and continue your business as usual. And lesson learned. It's always important to do not repeat the mistakes and identify that what the mistake that was made previously, so that they do not end up being compromised again. So in conclusion, cyber threats are evolving, and so our defense should. So with the advent of machine learning and AI, so cyber attacks are getting complex, and also information is out there for anyone to try to, for the sake of fun or for the sake of malicious intents that they want to perform. So it's always important that our defense should also evolve. So it's a race that's both both are locked in. So defense in depth is not a single solution, but a layered approach. I think Matt started with that one, that defense in depth is a layered approach. And just to emphasize on that one, that layered approach comes from physical security in place, from technical aspects, and also from administration and of the humans also. Redundancy and resilience are the keys to have defense in depth. If one layer fails, there must be another layer to protect it. So that's why it is called layered approach. So if your network is failed, then at least your users should be trained and educated enough so that they do not end up being compromised or being further causing the damage in there. Organization must continuously assess, adopt, and update their security postures. It's important that we are always on the move. So appropriate security measures are in place, and they are always updated when it is required. The goal is not to prevent, but detection, response, and recovery is defense in depth. That's we have. And in a nutshell, we can say in cybersecurity, layers bias due to time, and the time is everything. So the more layer and well orchestrated layer that you will have, the better time you will have to recover from an incident from that is happening, and also from incident happening and infiltrating within the digital infrastructure. And I think that's what we have covered. So if you have any question, please feel free to ask for the next 15 minutes or so.
Yeah, thank you, Zishan. So there's no questions in the Q&A. Does anybody have any questions? Raise your hand and then I'll unmute you. No, there doesn't appear to be anything. I appreciate that, there's a lot of content to cover there. Oh, hang on, we do have a question from Ian. I'll mute you.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, I think I've muted myself. Yeah, no, gosh, yeah, my brain is definitely full after that. Thank you.
We will provide we can provide the slides actually after, so you can sort of digest it at your leisure, and there will be a recording if you do want, if you need to get to sleep at night.
That's harsh, but that would be useful. Yeah, I mean, this is a question. So it's just interesting because the nature of our organization, we've just set up sort of multi-factor authentication using, a lot of people using personal devices as the they've installed the app or whatever. And I'm I suppose I'm in two minds about whether that actually creates as much of an additional liability as making things slightly more robust, because and I'd just be interested on your thoughts on.
Okay. So from a Cyber Essentials point of view,
you touched on personal devices. Yeah.
So from a Cyber Essentials point of view, it doesn't include devices that are used for multi-factor authentication. So if you just use a device to receive work phone calls, text messages, and to generate and for multi-factor authentication, that doesn't actually fall into the scope of Cyber Essentials. And the reason is that, having the multi-factor authentication on there doesn't give access to any of the data itself on that device. So it's absolutely fine for people to use personal devices for that, because the only other alternative really is email-based multi-factor authentication, SMS-based multi-factor authentication, which are less secure than a code generated on a mobile device, or providing hardware tokens to generate a one-time password. And obviously there's additional logistical issues and expense in doing that. So it's absolutely fine for people to use their personal devices for their authenticator to access work.
Thanks. That's really helpful.
It's better that than nothing,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is it. And it's, I mean, with just again from personal experience, I happened to be at my desk when I had a notification of a password breach, which I happened to act on immediately, and I think within 2 minutes, the breach was no longer a breach. But I did that. I mean, I'm not an IT expert by any means. I have responsibility for it within our organization. But it just shows that that instant, it's instantaneous. There's no kind of, the attacks are just constant, aren't they? But I'm not sure what I'm trying to say really, but from the point of view of the layers of security, I guess that's just a real example. It's the first one that I'm aware of having happened in our organization certainly in the last 3 or 4 years. But it just reinforces the importance of the layers, I guess, that you're talking about. But
and some of the areas we didn't talk about, well, we may briefly have touched on, is security monitoring. So being alerted to these things as they happen, and then being able to respond to those as they happen. But in a lot of organizations, certainly smaller organizations, that's not practical. You can't, you're not a 24/7 operation. However, there are external services that you can purchase called MDR, which is Managed Detection and Response, and essentially you're outsourcing the security operations to a third party who will work 24/7 and will give you that call at 2 o'clock in the morning if there's something serious. So there are ways around that, and it's a case of balancing up the risk. First identifying the risk, and then working out how do you mitigate it, or do you choose to accept it?
And it's also the case that the attackers are not stopping. So they are constantly on the move. So they are launching an attack. So that's why these solutions are continuously monitoring are significantly important for anyone to make their digital infrastructure secure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Any more questions? Okay, no, well, I think we'll wrap up then in that case. This is being recorded, and we will make the recording available to you, and we'll get to the slides out to you as well. Thank you very much for attending. I hope you found it useful. Our email address is actually there, so if you did want to contact us, feel free to do so.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. Then we'll wrap up. Cheers. Thank you. Bye-bye.